scrupulous Luciferians and their Islamist supplicants are pouring across the borders of several Western nations, including our own. The thrust of their zeal threatens to violate the sovereignty of our way of life, but we can never let it threaten our bodies. Presenting Homogard, a male chastity phallic blocker. It's designed to prevent any jihadi penetration to your rectum while applying moderate pressure to the prostate gland to promote your masculine vitality. Homogard. It is also equipped with an array of nodes to detect the brain activity of any potential Wahhabi salami near you, which will silently alert you with a subtle vibration. Homogard. This is a true breakthrough in health and defense, but don't take my word for it. Homogard made me feel safe, but I'm insecure in a whole nother way now. I never knew just how many Wahhabi terrorists were near me all the time. Thanks, Homogard. It's not a stretch of the imagination that our own bodies are under threat of an invasion, because Homogard has stretched out far more than that for me. We can and will defeat the globalist scum on the home front, but we need to make sure we're well protected around back. Homogard.
Hi, is this the line for free helicopter rides?
Hey, don't Israel my glasses.
No. God gave them to me.
Those are mine. Give
God
them back.
said it's mine. God said it's mine.
Persecution!
6 million! Help me, America! Help me, America! Well, if I didn't do it, someone else would.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is gonna steal it.
I was in the shop, getting my bagels, just using my phone, and this Palestinian terrorist, 3 times my size, wielding a knife, came out of nowhere, broke my arm, tried to take the phone that God gave to me.
Allah Akbar! Allah Akbar!
Did you just Israel my juice? Did you just Israel my chair?
God gave it to me.
What?
God said I could have it.
God said you could have it. That's my juice. I give that back. That's my juice.
God said it was mine.
Give me my chair. Give me my juice.
America!
Hey!
We wouldn't be able to take that kind of a risk. Show up the next day to meet me.
Allah Akbar! Allah Akbar!
I have the right to defend myself and my juice.
Did you just Israel my phone?
God gave it to me.
It's my phone.
God gave it
Give
to
it
me.
back.
God gave it to me.
Give it back.
Oh my God, America! She's got a knife! Ove! Help! Terrorist! Anti-Semite! I was in the shop getting my bagels, just using my phone, and this Palestinian terrorist, 3 times my size, wielding a knife, came out of nowhere, broke my arm, tried to take the phone that God gave to me.
Allah Akbar! Allah Akbar!
Did you just Israel my pen?
No, God gave it to me.
That's mine. Keep it back.
Here's 10% of a pen. It's a generous offer.
I want my pen. Keep it back.
America! America! Shooter.
Allah Akbar! Allah Akbar!
Okay, next question. What is it, CNN? Oh, you want a question? Are you a piece of shit? Yes, you are. Next question. MSNBC? Yeah, fuck yourself. WAPO? WAPO? Why isn't your hand raised, WAPO? Was I mean to you? Was I mean to you? Did Russia show up at your house, WAPO? It's okay. You can go home and cry on your dick-shaped pillow. Next question.
Zionism, fascism with a mythological rationalization for terrorism and territory. It's difficult for normal people to fathom the mindset of psychopaths. It is hard for sane people to understand the fanaticism of the God is a real estate agent crowd. And for some reason, so long as a group can maintain victimhood status, they can deflect and excuse their current abhorrent behavior. The individuals who would make up the first Israeli government and institutions were the same people who formed terrorist organizations where by any means necessary they would get Jews to move to Palestine, even if it meant working with the Nazis, even if it meant murdering children. The Haganah, Irgun, and Stern gangs were involved in terrorism well before the creation of Israel.
Okay, all right. Yes, Dr. Shiva's here. The progenitor of the email systems theory presidential candidate and the only guy that isn't gaffy, which means grabs ankles for Israel, which is basically how the Iowa caucus went down. It was this cocksucker, that cocksucker, and another cocksucker. That's all we had.
Right.
But the Icky Nicky got, oh no, she got second to last. The other pretendian got last.
Yeah. Where do you want to start, Ryan?
Well, I don't know, man. There's so, I guess, well, what do you think of, what do you think in general of this clown world debate stage? Like, can you believe we have 300 million people and these are the choices?
Well, Ryan, I did a look. I think when you really step back, and you're, my experience, I've been an activist since I was 16, 17 years old, an engineer and a scientist, and obviously someone who really cares about health, right? In all these areas, truth, freedom, and health as a scientist. But what's important to understand is that when you look at the swarm, the elites, they have created an entire system where elections are selections. And
Yeah.
and they have literally created, at a very, from a systems level, I think the simplest way for people to think about it is, let's say you have a king and he wants to protect the peasants from getting access to his kingdom. So first of all, he has palace guards around him, and then he has a wall around him. Then he has a moat, and maybe he'll put, I don't know, oil with other, stuff in front of that, right? So he has all these barriers to entry. And so the swarm has created a very powerful systematic way of controlling all of it. So if you think about it, first of all, they have these multi-billion-dollar organizations called political parties, right? And they also have the not so obvious political parties, like Kennedy's trying to do. He's a Zionist hoodlum too. He acts like he's against somebody's part of them. But anyway, you have quote unquote independent parties plus the GOP and the Democrats. Now the GOP and the Democrats, they're part of this very multiracial aristocracy, which is decentralized. They're part of the swarm, right? So the Democrats and Republicans, first of all, because they're part of the swarm, because they're essentially Zionist cocksuckers, right? They control which puppet gets to be in the beauty pageant stage, right? Because they control both wings of the media, left, right, etc. So the first part of this election deception, or this election corruption, occurs is that these parties are deciding who even gets visibility. So first thing is, who gets visibility on the mainstream media. So they decide, okay, this, one crazy nut, Nikki Haley, will give her visibility because she's banged a bunch of people that they needed her to bang, right? Ron DeSantis will get visibility because he's part of the Harvard-Yale clique, right? Trump gets visibility because he sucks Zionist cock all day. It's Netanyahu, as the data shows, that the work that was done by this great investigative reporter, it was Netanyahu who put Trump into power. And that should be really brought out.
Netanyahu used to sleep in Kushner's bed.
There you go. Okay. There you go. Okay. And
Charles Kushner, that is.
Then you look at Joe Biden, you look at all of these people. All right. They get overnight visibility. Vivek the Snake, we've talked about it, basically a piece of shit, who basically his entire resume is about bending over to the swarm and sucking Zionist cock. He's a cheater. His wealth is made from absolute scams, the stock scam. And notice none of them else ever attack him on that. It's interesting.
Him and his mother. Yeah.
But it's interesting, on the debate stage, no one went after that. It's
They
fascinating.
can't, because they're guilty of similar things.
Exactly. So because they have skeletons in their closet, they won't. All right. And this is how they all, among the swarm, never really attack each other unless they're willing to be attacked. Now, a guy like me.
There are a lot of people that didn't see through his charm school bullshit, though. They're like, he's saying the right things, except on Zion. He would tell them what they want to hear. A lot of people were like, I kind of like Vivek. I'm like, that guy is so full of shit. That's like thinking Obama was anti-war. Are you insane?
That's why I like talking to you, Ryan, because you have clarity on this. A lot of people, I don't know how old you are, in this 20, 30 age group, and then you have a bunch of just prostitutes like Candace Owens, right? I was even surprised. I don't know if this is true. Someone
She was from a modeling agency.
Yeah, Jake Shields put something out there like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with him. Someone should check in with him, because he's suddenly become anti-Zionist, or, I like him. I've spoken to him. But if he thinks that Vivek the Snake is not, beyond reproach, something's wrong. Okay. So it's fascinating. It's almost this neo-swarm cult is developing, you say? But ultimately, if you look at all of those people, they were selected up front who gets visibility. Democrats and Republicans. That's the first way that they're allowed to overcome the moat, right? And then they don't even have to get on the ballot. If you're an independent like me, we have to go collect 1.5 million signatures to get on the ballot. Either party, it's amazing. They don't have to get on the ballot. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen.
They feel entitled to, like when Ralph Nader was doing that, people would act like he's going to take votes away from whatever. I'm like, wait a minute. People vote for whoever they want. You're not entitled to those votes.
Exactly. It's fascism, man. It's absolute fascism. to think that he's taking votes. He can take votes away from whoever he wants. It's an open market, we thought, right? So, but the second thing is they make it difficult for us to get on the ballot. They don't even have to work. Again, this is a common thing, Ryan. These people are cheaters. They think they're an entitled class, Zionists, Nazis, Brahmins, whatever you want to call them, same thing. And because of that entitlement, they get a different set of rules.
Yeah, all three of those are racial supremacists.
Right. Brahmanism equals Nazism equals Zionism. This is why Vivek the Snake comes from this Brahmin culture, and everyone should trace that history, right? It's fascinating, Ryan, sorry. If you look at Nazism and Zionism, they both get their symbols from Brahmanism, the swastika and the inverted, the six-pointed star, which actually is a very powerful Hindu symbol that they've hijacked. It's quite fascinating. So the second part of the way is that
it's like a reverse cross.
Right.
A reverse manji is like having a upside down cross or something.
Right. But we have to actually mobilize volunteers. People are volunteers who come out. We have to get them to go in front of retail stores and then face the police and all this who don't even know the law that we're allowed to collect signatures, right? They don't have to do any of that. Kennedy is hiring professional signature gatherer, vendors. He got 15 million from a bunch of Zionist hoodlums, and he doesn't even have to go do the work. I had to go out to Utah. We collected signatures, right?
Does he have a sign in his rabbi's dildo shop?
Probably. Probably, man. But he's sucking a lot of Zionist cock. But
they have him over such a barrel. That guy had a sexual addiction. He's on Epstein flights, and you're wondering why he's, because he's not I won't say he's dumb. He's compromised. That is clear.
Yeah, his whole family's compromised. Everyone is compromised. They want to compromise others. Those people who are compromised want to compromise others.
Yeah, Joe Kennedy came straight out of the mob.
Exactly. Those people are con men, want to con you, and those people want to be want to follow con men, right? Like Vivek the Snake, all these guys. So
he's out, right? I think he dropped out and endorsed Trump. So
yeah, he's
play the 1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indian. Oh wait, one's gone.
Right. But it's not. This was all very well orchestrated, right? They create the fake dialectic, etc. So our volunteer, a young electrician who works full time, goes on Sunday to collect signatures from a Walmart. The manager comes out, says he can't collect signatures. He says, no, I have the right to be here. The Prune Yard Supreme Court ruling says during an election cycle, this, what you consider private property, becomes a town square during an election cycle. Then the cops show up. The cops handcuff him, throw him behind a cop car, take him to jail, strip search him, cavity search him.
Searched him? Why?
Yeah. Harassing him, right? And then I did an emergency live. Lots of our followers called up the police. This is in some Franklin, Kentucky. They let him out. And then they steal his wallet, cash in his wallet. And then he has to walk an hour and a half in the middle of the night back to his car. This is what's going on to our volunteers.
That's Kentucky. This is not Ukraine. That's Kentucky.
No, this is Franklin, Kentucky, which is a red state, which is where Rand Paul and Thomas Massie come from, so-called token constitutionalists. The red state where people support the First Amendment. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's red, but they're still Yankees.
Right. So I want to give that example because we're not cheating. We go get volunteers. We have to recruit volunteers. We have to train them. Kennedy just raises $15 million, is going to go pay professional signature gatherers $10. So you see, first is visibility.
How can someone sign up to gather? I know this has to be notarized, but who could gather signatures for you? Like, could they download something and gather that for you? And then
No. Every state, it's very, very complicated. It's a Herculean task. Every state has different signature gathering rules. Every state has different numbers. Utah, we have to gather 1,000 signatures. Florida, 130,000. In order to get 130,000 approved, you have to actually gather 260,000 because they're cheaters. They're going to throw away half of your signatures. You say? So they make it impossible, Ryan.
A lot of them, like, they have to have their address on there, and people will give a fake one, or they don't want to give their address because it's sketchy.
Yeah. So imagine you have to mobilize hundreds of thousands of volunteers. You have to motivate them to get out. And then you face all this police state intimidation. When the law is there, the Supreme Court in 1980, the Prune Yard ruling ruled that during an election cycle, you can collect nomination signatures. The so-called private property in front of a retailer becomes superseded by the individual constitutional rights, right? They purposely do not teach the police this. So we have to educate the police. It's total bullshit. But anyway, if you go back to 2018, we got 25,000 signatures and got on the ballot for Senate. In 2020, we did it. We got visibility. And then the third step that they do, so one is they prevent you from getting visibility. Trump, Vivek the Snake, DeSantis, overnight they get visibility because they're all part of that swarm. Then they don't have to collect ballot signatures. Third, they get to debate. In Massachusetts in 2018, when I was running against Warren, I was running as an independent. We got all the signatures. I was polling at, north of 10, 12%. I was supposed to be allowed on the debate stage. Democrats and Republicans didn't allow me. I had to go file a lawsuit.
They will never let you on the debate stage.
Exactly. And same thing in 2020, they canceled all the debates in the Senate race. So that's the third way. They do not want outsiders who are articulate debating them. Then the fourth thing that they do is in 2020, I saw this. We got visibility. We were everywhere because we raised our own money. We got billboard ads, 25,000 lawn signs. Then we got on the ballot. Then they canceled the debates. So then what do, Ryan? They literally steal the fucking election. And then I had to file a lawsuit on that. So everyone listening needs to understand that they do not want one of us, Ryan, guys like us, ever coming up bottoms up, following their rules and actually doing it. They have all
some states don't even have voter ID. Like,
right.
People can vote more than once.
But that they do for themselves, to cheat for themselves. I'm talking about this fundamental aspect of they've set up these walls so bottoms up people, working people can never do it. And this is why they're so afraid of our campaign. This is why Fucker Carlson, who knows me, Joe Rogan, who follows me for 10 years, because they know that if we ever got on their platforms, their shows are over. All of their followers are going to say, wait a minute, you hid this guy for 10 years. You concealed this lawsuit, Fucker Carlson, you say? So that's why.
Yeah, look at when Rogan went to Spotify, they removed a whole bunch of his interviews, and it was anytime he talked to anybody that wasn't a hardcore leftist. And he knows better.
And he knows better. He's controlled. His agent is Ari Emanuel, who owns WWE. He owns Endeavor. Right? He was Trump's. What's that?
It's my Zog whistle.
Okay. He's Trump's former agent, right? So Joe Rogan, waits 3 years and then he talks about, oh my God, these vaccines. Waits in 2014.
Now, he was clueless until they personally went after him because he took ivermectin and something, and they put him on CNN and they grade his face, and it was like he realized that's not true because he's in the video. Everyone else, he wasn't listening until it happened to him, but he's got these filters that little dork Brian that decides who the guests are and stuff. He doesn't let he's never had a real libertarian on. It's like always. Most of his guests are of the Zionist variety. He'll have people like Barry Weiss and Sam Harris and stuff on there. Get Norman Finkelstein on there, or Gideon Levy, or Nico Pellet, or somebody. No, that ain't gonna happen. And that would go supernova if people got to see that. It's the largest podcast in the world. It's not gonna touch it.
Yeah, he didn't become the larger podcast by himself. He was selected and promoted and supported. If you look at when they realized, being anti-vaxxer was now becoming in vogue, when he tried to do that, he lost followers and then he gained followers, and you could see the Spotify stock go up and down. And he changed his tune as the stock went up and down. People should just go watch it.
Yeah, he won't have health professionals on except for Robert Malone once, which got a lot of trouble, but he'll, push DMT and marijuana.
Right. Well, you have to understand Robert Malone is part of the establishment. I didn't see him saying anything in 2020. All of these guys who realized where the masses were moving, they waited 1.5 years or 2 years to even talk about vaccine mandates. So I think, Ryan, what we're seeing with the Iowa caucus, you can see right then and there is that Trump wins a beauty pageant because he will suck Zionist cock the hardest. And he's done it for them before. His entire cabinet was Zionist. Jared Kushner was essentially his chief of staff. Ivanka, what the fuck is she doing there? Okay. And
yeah,
but
he declared the Golan Heights part of Israel. He had the Abrams Accords. He just,
yep.
he did everything short of a war with Iran. That's
Yes,
only
and
because
but
they'd
what
lose.
he did was he screwed up their, the nuclear agreement. And if you go read, I think his name is Brofman's work, investigative report 8 months ago, he laid it all out. The Mueller report, Trump was accused of the Russian hoax, but it was actually deception within the deception. The reality was the FBI in the unredacted version shows that it was Netanyahu who had an agent who contacted Roger Stone and
It was
told him, look,
Netanyahu that pressured Kushner to get on Flynn's case to do phone calls to the Security Council, which included Russia as among them, because they were trying to block the from a resolution saying condemning Israeli settlements. I don't know why that was a big deal, because even when those pass, Israel just ignores them anyway. But it's the first time Obama decided to abstain, and so the resolution did pass, and they still build settlements.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The previous administration was putting pressure on, so Netanyahu could not allow that. So it was an agreement that was struck with Trump. And the important thing to understand is there was only one news report of this investigative work. I'm going to do a whole video on this, but the bottom line is there was a involvement in the U.S. election. It was from Israel.
Yeah,
Israel,
I think Brad Hoff wrote about it in the Levant Report, and I think Jim Loeb has covered it too. The problem is you got to be like a super dork like me to know who to even follow to dig in and get these things. There's some good stuff like the Gray Zone, Iran, or whatever, but it's all sort of like degrees of Kevin Bacon from YouTube. If you're not attached to somebody on YouTube, then you're invisible. Like if you're 3 steps down, then it doesn't matter. And most people just don't know where to go to get information, because they kind of give you like not controlled opposition, but just sort of like the light beer version or whatever, that doesn't really get into it. Israel interferes in all of our elections, all of them. They all go to AIPAC, they all kiss the ring, they're openly bribing them. It's obvious. And they're like, everything they said about Russia, Israel's actually guilty of.
Yeah, you nailed it. The interesting thing is Israel is a center of global election interference. Global. And this is widely known. And they work very, very closely with MI6. So if you look at the Argentinian elections, right, they were very involved in that. If you look at every election throughout the world, it is Mossad and Israel, which is involved heavily into election interference. Now, all of this is documented. Netanyahu's calling into Roger Stone, striking the deal. And the deal was that Trump would move the embassy to Israel. He would fuck up the Iran agreement. And that's
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. Yeah. And that's why Netanyahu was going to give him all the data that they had gathered from Russia, which would help his campaign. So that did happen. Okay. But they used Russia as the boondoggle that Trump could, say, I didn't do it, but it was Israel. So Trump was put into power by Israel, period. And they're going to probably put him into power again. Right. And that's the plan. And then
do you think he's felt backstabbed when Netanyahu, the first person he called after the election, was Biden to congratulate him? Did he feel like the frog in the
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what everyone in the world needs to understand is it is Israel which runs America.
Yep.
And so Netanyahu doesn't give a fuck what Trump thinks. And Trump knows Netanyahu doesn't give a fuck what he thinks, because
you remember when Netanyahu brought his laundry to the U.S. so the White House could do his dirty clothes?
I didn't know that. Is that true?
He brought his laundry with him, and he made the Americans wash his dirty underwear.
Are you serious? Yeah. I mean, if you read his quotes, his attitude is America works for me.
Yeah.
And they have very, very, they have no regard for the American people. It is.
He went to Congress with Obama wasn't even there, and he got 55 standing ovations.
Are you serious?
Foreign prime minister was in the Congress, and they're all up there clapping like seals and standing up. 55 standing ovations.
Yeah.
For Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And I was like, just capture this right here. a prime minister of a foreign state is at the podium with the entire Congress looking at him, not even invited, just goes and like, look, I'm in charge here.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to say it, Ryan. I don't think people understand the level of control of Zionists of America. So Trump will talk his nonsense and try to, do his braggadocio, but he's owned. He's owned by Netanyahu. He's owned by Israel. He can say shit against him. Netanyahu doesn't care. And this is the bottom line. And I think everyone needs to understand that. And the Christian Zionists are owned by Israel, right? They all report up to them. And probably every member of Congress, as we know, if they got 55 standing ovation, that explains it all, right? Because 90% of them are getting funded by AIPAC, and the other probably 10%.
Can you imagine like Xi Jinping or somebody like the president of China came in and got 55 standing ovations from the American Congress? Or can you imagine us going to some other country and speaking to their parliament or whatever equivalent to Congress, and they're all like, no way.
Right.
And it didn't matter. It's like they overplay their hand. It's hubris. You can see it. There it is. And it doesn't register. They're like that. Yeah, Christian Zionists. They think they follow like the book the trans Semites wrote and be like, oh yeah, that's their land. God gave it to them. God's a real estate agent. They have this like supernatural version of God that just creates stuff out of nothing and favors certain people and gives them a land that other people live on. I'm like, I think those people wrote that down.
The reality is, even if you go look, and they call that, it's a very funny word. It's called the eschatological. It probably should be called the scatological, but the eschatological view of Christianity only appeared about 150 years ago. It was made up. That has this whole thesis on when the Jews return to Jerusalem, Armageddon comes, This is all nonsense. It's all just made up. It has nothing to do with anything with the New Testament or redemption or any of that. So all of this shit was just made up. And then Theodore Herzl connects with a guy, I believe his name is Martin Heckler, who came up with this view. He's a fanatic about it. Herzl was an atheist. And they intersect these two one political ideology with a fake religious base. And they create this thing called Zionism. So I think most people, recently from October 7th, you've been hammering it away. I've been hammering it away, that Zionism is racism in the service of imperialism. Zionism equals Nazism. All the Brahmins in India, right? All were supporting the decimation of the Palestinians. So you can see that Brahmanism equals Zionism equals Nazism. It's this philosophy that a small set of people get to have their own rules. They're better than us. And that's fundamentally what people need to realize. And then they create, Ryan, we can see these fake wars. Oh, red versus blue, Trump versus Biden. Ooh, they're stealing Trump's ballot access in Maine. We're going to do that in Texas. So they create this fake dialectic, between red versus blue. And then within the parties, they create fake anti-establishment versus establishment. Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton, right?
Yeah,
right?
They had 93% overlapping voting.
Exactly.
Right, those two.
And then you look at Vivek versus Trump versus Nikki Haley. So they have created, during an election cycle is when they really put into gear all their theater. But I think, Ryan, the work that, in spite of all the shadow banning that we've been doing, hitting this issue hard, you can see that the self-reflective people are like, wait a minute, this is true. These people are all Zionist cocksuckers. That video that I did, it just came out of nowhere, right? But it did pretty well because other people said, wait a minute, this guy's absolutely right. Every presidential candidate.
Well, you said what everybody's been waiting for someone serious to say.
Yeah.
And you did it in a very blunt way, which I think you kind of need that shock value to get your foot in the door.
Well, that video got out not by us because we're shadow banned. Some other woman downloaded it, put it up on TikTok, and then it went everywhere, right? So to everyone listening, we have to do this Viet Cong strategy where people download pieces and they put them up because.
So it's okay to Israel from your channel since you're shadow banned. We can steal or Israel your stuff and then re-upload it to get around the ban.
Yeah,
okay.
I just did it.
I will start to hinkle your channel then.
Hinkle it. That piece of shit.
That's when you grab people's stuff and put it on your own.
I was on a live with that guy Suleiman, who's has no spine, with Hinkle, and someone starts talking about free speech, and I explain the entire background of the backdoor portal. He goes, "This is boring." He's a fucking piece of shit. Hinkle.
This is boring?
Yeah. So,
oh, yeah. He's a dork.
yeah, the guy's a dork, and it's obvious.
He didn't say one word about Palestinians until the 7th of October.
Yeah.
Didn't care at all. He just saw which way the wind was blowing and jumped there. He grabs everyone else's stuff and puts it on Instagram, which is where like the Middle East lives. And so they're all like, give him all this praise. I'm like, he has no movies, no books, doesn't even podcast, doesn't write articles. He just takes stuff from Telegram and Twitter and sticks it on Instagram, and then a buy me a coffee link on top of that. I'm glad you're spreading the pro-Palestine message, but if you really cared about that and wanted this, you would elevate all the people who actually develop the content. Is your repost button broken, son? You know, like there's no reason to Israel stuff from other people.
Well, the whole thing here is, Ryan, if you look back, I mean, in my view, he's a liberal Zionist. He probably works for the Zionists, okay? Because when you fundamentally look at it,
he's a communist.
Well, he doesn't know what the fuck he is. Okay, that too. You know?
He's a communist. He wants his private property in his LLC. I'm like, you're just throwing out words.
Here's the deal, Ryan. What's happened is that those in power know that real working people's movements are coming up bottoms up. Okay? So they're watching this phenomenon. And then, through Mossad and MI6 and the CIA, they literally are creating the people who talk the talk but actually work for them. So if you look at back in 1980, I did one of the biggest protests here in Massachusetts when a guy called Mir Kahane came up. This guy's wanted to just butcher everyone, right? It's when Ariel Sharon had taken tanks and rolled over people in Gaza. So anyway, who was out there? Same old.
That's how they started the first Intifada, was shooting people at prayer, 29 people in the back.
Exactly. Yeah. And the same time, you had the liberal Zionists show up who would say, ceasefire now. See, the key word in their bullshit slogan is now. Ceasefire now, but then you can go back later. Ceasefire now, so they've been using ceasefire now for nearly 40 years.
It's never really a ceasefire because, this has been pointed out by many others, but when they say there was like peace, when was there peace for Palestine? Look at the October 7th stuff. 224 Palestinians were murdered this year prior to October 7th. So it was never peace for them. This is just an acceleration on the death count. It's peace because no Israelis got killed.
Right.
But they can kill, they can steal property, burn farms. All that is violence. It's not peaceful, but it's all quiet as long as they boil the frogs slowly. Take a house here, take a house there. But for Palestinians, what peace? They've never had peace.
And I think in the United States, the other thing I think I've been trying to message very hard out there, probably for the last 30, 40 years, but is that the occupation needs to end in the United States. Zionist occupation of America needs to end if we're going to end Zionist. And this is a very, very...
It's what Pat Buchanan said.
Yeah. So you can't talk about ceasefire now as a bogus liberal Zionist slogan. The real slogan, the real truly revolutionary slogan for the working people of the United States is end the occupation of Zionism here from Palestine. So this is these slogans are very, very important. So ceasefire now has been a very valuable slogan to Zionism, because every time, and by the way, I was out in Utah helping collect signatures, educating people. And there was a Palestinian rally. A Palestinian woman called our campaign.
Ceasefire now was go back to killing them slowly instead of quickly.
Exactly. Or 2 steps forward for Israel, 1 step back. But they're always making 1 step forward, right? But this is interesting. What you notice over the last 40 years in the so-called Palestinian movement is that most of the bougie Palestinians are pussies. They live in Kuwait. They drive around in their Mercedes and their BMWs, wearing their little scarf is just a thing to do, man. They do not really want to help the Palestinian people. Yasser Arafat was a total scumbag, okay? And what's happened with the movements in Palestine is if there was truly a revolutionary movement, they would be arming all the Palestinians like a popular militia. And they haven't done that. And this is why most of these movements there have been completely co-opted by liberal Zionists or Zionists themselves. Hamas, as we know, was created by Israel. We talked about this, right? But one of the critical things is that in the United States, the liberal Zionists, the liberal Jewish Zionists, control all of these movements. So when I was out in Utah, there was this big protest. So a Palestinian woman says, "Oh, Dr. Shiva, you should speak there." I said, "Look, they're not going to allow me to speak there." She goes, "What do you mean? You're against Zionism?" I said, "Yeah, but that movement and all your movements in the United States are owned by a group in Washington which reports up to Israel." She goes, no way. I'm going to convince them to have you come speak." I go, "Watch." And I'm there, man. I was only there for 2 days. It was just totally coincidental. She goes, "Oh my God."
Yeah, you get all these groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
But what they do is they narrow down the Zionist problem to only Palestine, and then they narrow that down further rather than talking about occupation, like, oh, you need to ceasefire, blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying the Zionist problem is a lot worse than Palestine. We would not have had a war in Iraq if it wasn't for the OSP and Zog. We would not have gone to war in Syria or been supporting ISIS. We wouldn't have sanctions on Iran. They stole nuclear technology from us. They've attacked U.S. sailors. They've blown up embassies. They're terrorists. They run these giant pedophile rings, by the way. Like, look, by the way, everybody, cheap plug, here is your Epstein crime map. I put the client list, the real client list on the back with the real name. That's not just copying the black book or the flight logs. That's the actual perpetrators. I'm so sick of people posting these fake lists. Like, it was Glenn Dubin and Leon Black, the Bronfman family, the same syndicate that finances the human trafficking and gun running for generations that backed up Epstein. He was a construct. But they have all these things, and it all goes back to Israel. Both Iraq wars, in fact, go back to Israel. That wouldn't happen. The Middle East would not be the way it is. But they want to act like it's just a Palestine problem. Palestine is definitely, and I talk about that too. I'm wearing an End All Aid Israel sweater that I made. That's a big thing. But you cannot limit the problem with Israel to the Palestinian problem, because most people, to be honest, don't give a fuck about Palestinians. They're like, honestly, they're like, it doesn't affect my life. I'm like, did the Iraq war affect your life? It affected your gas price. It affected your business. Because the thing is, people need like altruistic camouflage, like some reason, like, oh, we're helping the Kurds or whatever, but really a financial motivation. That's how most people operate. And you can tell them this conflict in Syria, if obviously it was immoral, just all the killing and stuff, all the starvation from sanctions, all that ought to move people, but it doesn't. They say, okay, well, here's what it did to the economies. You spent $6 trillion. This is what happened to oil prices. This is what happened to U.S. relations, all these negative things. And why? Because you're grabbing your ankles for Israel. But we don't get to talk about Iraq or 9/11. They lied. The Israelis said they witnessed a transfer of anthrax to Mohammed Atta in Prague. There was no meeting in Prague. Iraq didn't have anthrax. Neither did Al-Qaeda. They just made that up. And that linked Saddam Hussein to 9/11 when Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. The Israelis were celebrating it, though. They don't want you to start digging. They don't want you to look at it. They're like, oh, Epstein was just a billionaire pervert that did this all by himself. No, that's not what happened. They don't want you to see that. They're just, oh, it's just Palestine. That's how they limit it. Gilad Osman's talked about it a lot, too. I don't want the conversation narrowed down to Palestine. I'm fine with talking about Palestine, but you're like, oh, don't bring in all these other things. Like, yes, bring in all these other things, because people care about little girls getting serial raped. People care about all these other nations and stuff, too. It's not just Gaza Strip and West Bank, because if you do that, they pull this turd and say, well, they're firing rockets every day. Totally not true. They conflate the West Bank and Gaza like it's all one thing. Totally not true. You got to get over all these hurdles. There's already a giant movement against the Iraq war, but they think it was for oil or something. You have to point out, no, every single pre-war lie that led to that conflict came from these people. And for these reasons, and it wasn't oil. We already had the oil for food program. We didn't get Iraqi exports after the war. These people lied about mobile weapons labs. These are the people who lied about yellow cake uranium. These are the ones that said, William Safire saying there's bombs under the palaces. That's Israel. Israel caused all these conflicts.
Well,
The only thing they're aware of is
remember
Palestine.
Mossad's slogan, right, Ryan?
Yeah, by deception we'll do war.
Yeah, it's right in front of us. Through deception thou shalt do war. The interesting thing with Iraq is many, many years ago, when I was traveling, I was out on the West Coast. This driver comes, picks me up. He says he was in the Iraqi Guard and he left. And I said, what's going on? And this was like 1993, right? And he said, you know, let me tell you what's really going on in Iraq. He said, the reality, what's going on is, you know, Saddam Hussein was obviously put there by the United States. You know, the United States puts dictators everywhere.
He was the CIA asset.
He was the CIA asset, Israeli asset, all those things, right?
To launch a war with Iran, yep.
Right. But more importantly, in addition to that, the Iraqi people are some amazing people, very, very professional, very organized people. So right before the first invasion of Iraq, in 13 provinces in Iraq, there were massive uprisings of the Iraqi people against Saddam. Okay? This guy's father was a professor, an intellectual, who was a mayor of one of those provinces, and he had organized protests against Saddam. So it was the United States, under the pretext of, you know, oh my God, Saddam is crossing into Kuwait. We actually went in there. It's an amazing set of facts what this guy shared with me. He goes, Shiva, I actually was there when U.S. military came in, not to attack Saddam, but to put down these bottoms-up revolutions that were taking place against Saddam to make sure Saddam was kept in power. He said he literally saw, he goes, with my own eyes, there was a bridge, there were Iraqis protesting Saddam, thousands of them. U.S. F-15s came and they mowed them all down. Okay? So the U.S. did a police job for Saddam to install him back into power. And then he goes, after the war, he goes, I saw them with my own eyes give all the weapons back to Saddam. You see, so the central thesis everyone needs to understand is the U.S. talks about democracy here, and it's really a bourgeois democracy. It's not real. But every part of the world, U.S. with Israel, with British imperialism, has installed dictators. We put back the Taliban into power in Afghanistan. We put back Saddam back into power. And then when he got too much out of line, we took him out. But within Iraq, there have been uprisings. Within, you know, Afghanistan, I mean, women were carrying on RPGs, asking Trump to help them to overthrow the Taliban. We did not want a democratic movement in Afghanistan because the people of Afghanistan would take over their rare earth minerals, right? It was
Operation Ajax in
right.
Iran too.
So I think the working people of the United States need to realize the working people in Afghanistan, be it wherever they are, they're all being abused by the swarm, by Zionism, by US and British imperialism. So we install dictators wherever we go. And we subjugate and we suppress truly natural democratic movements. And this needs to be really fully appreciated. We've done this in Iraq. And Tulsi fucking Gabbard is another Zionist prostitute, right? She acts like she's against, again, pure deception. Oh, I'm against a military-industrial complex. She's put on Fox. She's put everywhere, right? Overnight. She's the one who first supported. She was all rabid about going into Iraq. She was all rabid about going into Palestine.
Yeah, the limited argument there is kind of like the Kerry Bush thing. Is like, well, we should have had a multilateral war instead of a unilateral war.
Yeah.
That we went to war was a given.
Right. Right. Each different sides of the establishment of the swarm essentially give a little bit better way how to subjugate people. Better. That's about it. But I think, Ryan, what I see happening is, look, the data gathering capabilities of Palantir, Mossad, MI6 is quite enormous. They have enough data to watch the sentiments of this video, every video that's taking place. They know that broad masses of people in the United States are starting to figure out the deeper deception. They're figuring out Fucker Carlson is full of shit. They're figuring out Glenn Greenwald is full of shit. They're figuring out Vivek.
Wait, you mean Tucker talking about UFOs is a bunch of bullshit?
Yeah, I mean,
of course it is.
Oh yeah, when I was at Fox making $25 million, I dare not speak about this because I could lose my money. Are you fucking serious? This guy's as establishment as you can get. But I think what's happening, Ryan, is people are actually starting to figure that out. And that's why the establishment is releasing more of their assets. They've created a multi-diversity layer of these not so obvious establishment people. They have Trump for the working class whites. They try to find a brown skin Indian, doofus, right, to manipulate another set of the working class. They have Bernie Sanders, they have AOC. They've created a whole Baskin Robbins.
AOC.
Right, but I'm
What a
saying,
joke.
yeah, they've created these people to act like they're anti-establishment when they're wholly in the establishment.
It's worse than that because they make a figurehead for the opposition a complete donkey. Like that's your AOC, that's your voice for
Right.
the working people or something. She's a moron.
Right. Well, they had Bernie, you say, and then
Bernie financed every war there ever was. I think he voted against the Iraq war. He was okay with Syria, he was okay with Libya, he's okay with every other conflict, but that's the anti-war guy.
Well,
the anti-war guy was like Ron Paul, maybe. He was sincere.
Yeah, but
Bernie Sanders is a joke.
He didn't fight all the way. And then you have someone they pull out like Cornel West. Okay, he's a doofus. They pull out.
Oh, he's entertaining though.
Yeah, he's an entertainer, and it's
Jones.
only now, like 6 months ago or 5 months ago, he figures out, oh, Bernie was bad. All these years, he couldn't figure this out. You see what I'm saying? So they've created all these characters, but I think, Ryan, I actually see a lot of. I mean, I look at my social media comments, and I see people like figuring this shit out now. I mean, they're going and attacking Vivek. They go attack Booby Kennedy. They go attack Fucker Carlson. It's wonderful to watch that it's not lots and lots. I'm not talking millions or hundreds of millions of people, but it's enough that did not exist 2 months ago, 6 months ago, 24 months ago. And I think that's what's really very cool to watch. That and that's what we want to throw the kerosene on, We want to enable people to understand the system's dynamics of what they're doing. Because I think the more one individual raising their consciousness on seeing through Fucker Carlson, seeing through Vivek the Snake, it's easy to talk about Biden and Clinton and the Bushes. That's easy. That's a no-brainer. But seeing through, Tulsi Gabbard, seeing through these Bernie Sanders, that is a very
though, when Tulsi started grabbing her ankles for Israel, that's when a lot of people who used to support her turned on her. And the same thing with Robert Kennedy Jr. There were a lot of people that fell for his shit until he started just overtly supporting the apartheid state, and then everyone's, oh, I was your supporter, but not now. And that I love that issue is becoming the litmus test. Like, if you support these racist psychopaths that are dropping houses on babies, I can't vote for you. It's not happening.
It's a good thing, man. That's happened over the last 20 years. Even, and you can see the phenomenon that's taking place with this scumbag Bill Ackman. You know this guy, right?
Yeah,
like Neri Oxman, right?
He's
Neri
right
Oxman,
on here.
He was at the Media Lab, years after I left. Total made up. She's made up. They made her up as though she's some genius intellectual, right? Totally made up. And then, Ackman becomes whatever her financier or her husband. All right, whatever way you want to look at it.
I don't think we have genius intellectuals anymore. We're dealing with a population like some chunk that thinks the earth is flat. I'm really seriously worried about the youth. The knowledge that has been accumulated over centuries is not being passed down. They're so obsessed with some sexual escapades of celebrities or whatever, and just garbage. They don't know 4th grade science. And
I think you nailed it, Ryan.
It's I think the Unabombers might have been right. Like, we're headed off a cliff.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, you see all these people talking nonsense, talking about ridiculous shit, right? Thinking to get views. Tell them to solve a simple algebra problem. They can't. Tell them to go solve a simple Navier-Stokes equation. They can't. Tell them to solve a calculus
Not
problem.
even algebra. You could say, what's 5 times 9? And they'd be like, they'd panic.
I noticed that. I had a young guy, 30 years old. He couldn't do simple math. And, this is what's going on. And it's really, really sickening. And these same people are out there posting social media posts, giving their fucking opinions. You're a fucking nut job. You don't have the skills to even talk about anything. And this is what's going on. And what's also interesting, Ryan, you'll notice that these cheaters, the people get into these so-called elite universities now. The very wealthy parents fund these dumb kids. They get them consultants who write their essays. All the standardized exams, the quality of them have actually gone. The exam qualities aren't even there. Like they're
using chat GPT and stuff to write essays. They plagiarize. They just Google whatever they have to. The teachers aren't really ahead of the curve to know how good the students are at cheating. That's like, you got to have a participation grade. If that person can't live action, like show you they know what they're talking about, it should just like, there has to be a more serious way to filter out these professional cheaters. And I know there are people in college, first of all, like half of them are doped up on Adderall. And then all they do is they're professional cut and pasters because that'll work. It'll work good enough to pass what you need to. And they never learn anything. And they don't. And more importantly, even the crap because you do have to memorize some things, they don't understand it. They just know it's like it really is an NPC. When they say A, I go to B and say this thing. Don't even know what it means.
Well, you know what's interesting? Years ago, 15, 20, the MIT PhD, 50% of the people would fail the qualifying exams. And these are pretty smart people. The way they did the PhD qualifier was you had to do a written exam, and then you had to take 4 writtens and 4 orals. And when you did an oral exam, which was in front of people,
Kamala Harris was excellent at the oral, I heard. Her oral exam. Yeah.
You would get a little piece of paper with a problem on it. And then you had 10 minutes. Then you had to go into a room with an old, classic chalk and blackboard. And you had 4 of the leading people in the world in that room. So they would give you a question and you had to solve that problem interacting with them in 30 minutes. You see, that's where you really learn. That's where you have to get up on and you have to derive stuff from first principles and 10. And you don't know what question they're going to ask you.
That's why I like stuff like foreign languages and mathematics, because you can't bullshit your way out. If you can't speak a language, like you can have a 2-minute oral exam and know whether someone can speak French or whatever it is right away. And with math, you could give them like geometry is pretty fair. That's pretty easy. You give some long proof and like, do it right in front of me right now. If they can't do it, it just shows just a general lack of intelligence. Not that you're going to need this, like, oh, I gotta have trigonometry. Probably not, but it's an IQ test in a way. Like, if you can't do this, then that's metadata on other things. And if you can speak a foreign language, it doesn't mean you're super intelligent. You can just be good at that. But there's just some minimal level of effort and discipline you have to do to acquire a language. It's not like deep thinking, but it is deep discipline, because you won't be able to do it unless you're consistently doing it every day, like lifting weights or something. And so those are good barometers, I think. But it's really hard, the school system. Like, what do you do to prevent all this cheating? It's almost impossible to have like interviews with each kid or something. Like, how do you get around it?
I think it's pretty easy, actually. You go back to old school pen and paper, in class.
There you go.
Assignments. I have an AP chemistry teacher. I was talking about this earlier. This is in the 70s. See, in the 70s, you had the tail end of some of the great teachers. This guy was the AP chemistry teacher. He ended up winning the presidential award of 5 teachers. He was a full-time carpenter, and he was a general contractor. That's how he put 2 of his kids through school, because he couldn't make enough money. So he taught because he enjoyed teaching. And when you took his class, we went from statistical mechanics. This is in 11th grade, okay, all the way up to hybridization of orbitals. I mean, deep stuff that you don't learn actually in perhaps the third year.
And let me point this out. Back then, that actually meant something, because now they have classes that have these really super fancy names, but it doesn't. They're not doing
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So this was all chalk and blackboard, right? Now, when you took an exam with him, he was very, very strict. So if the answer, let's say you had to solve a complex stoichiometric problem, and the answer was a concentration of hydrogen, I'm making this up, is 97.731, okay? And let's say you put 97.73. You got 10 points off. Why? Because that 1/1000th could blow up a reactor if you were actually doing chemistry, you say? And so people would bitch and moan at him. He said, no, what are you talking about? And he was super harsh. And this guy's, one of his students was, I think, Stephen Chen, who won the Nobel Prize. And Mr. Walker said, my best student was Shiva. All right. Now, the reason I share that was I busted my ass. And he was at the tail end of the late 70s. You don't have to, I don't think you have teachers like this anymore. So now they give participation trophies. They give A's if the kid worked on it, even though the answer was wrong. Well, in engineering and physics, you better have the right fucking answer, or you're trying to fit two pipes and one doesn't couple right. You have leaks, right? You could blow up a reactor.
But you could work at Lockheed Martin.
You could
you could build stuff that doesn't work, but it's expensive. Right. And what's more American than spending money on shit that doesn't work?
Right. So if you look at the last several years, there's something called the mathematics papers. 15, 20 years ago, out of the top 10 papers, it was mainly Americans. Now it's flipped. It's Chinese and other foreign countries. So, but man, I love mathematics, just as much as
all my best teachers. While you were talking, I was thinking all the best teachers I ever had were over 60.
Yeah. Yeah. So these guys really cared about teaching. They could derive stuff from first principles. I mean, just with pen and paper, you could go end to end. They could derive De Moivre's theorem, everything end to end, right? Anything you can talk about, and I can still do that. And what's unfortunate is people are just learning formulas. They can't derive anything from scratch. So with Newton's equations and with differential equations, you should be able to derive pretty much everything. Most of these guys cannot do that anymore. There's only a finite set of people. So they don't even know where an equation comes from.
Trust me, if you start talking about Dirac equations or Lorentz transformations or something, like half my audience, and my audience is pretty bright, don't know what the fuck you're saying.
Yeah.
And they ought to. Well, I mean, because what I just said is not that weird or anything. Those are the most common things that you're going to have.
Yeah, I mean, there was, everyone should read, if they are listening, there's a paper that a guy called C.P. Snow wrote. I read this in 9th grade. C.P. Snow wrote an essay called The Two Cultures. C.P. Snow was a physical chemist, and he was a literature major, a literateur. And what he would do for fun is in England. So, he was hardcore physical chemist, and he was also very good at literature. He would go to these hoity-toity parties in London, where people were walking, and he'd go, oh, can you tell me the first law of thermodynamics? And they go, what are you talking about? Oh, can you tell me who Shakespeare was? They knew who Shakespeare was. And his point was, in general knowledge, if you know who Shakespeare is, great. But do you know the first and second law of thermodynamics? These are equivalent pieces of knowledge that people should know. And so we have created a world of fucking dummies. And this is what you look at that GOP stage. I don't think any one of those fuckers could derive anything. And now you go to this Communist Party of China, 90% of them are engineers. They actually can derive shit. They can go to first principles. Many of them know actually how to build a bridge. They know how much it costs. You see, so we're living in this very, very interesting world where we're relying on people to decide our laws, and they don't even know the foundational elements of what they're talking about. So therefore, these puppets have to rely on who? Lobbyists and analysts who are paid for, brought to you by AIPAC and Zionism, etc. So you watch anyone on those House subcommittees asking questions, they're watching a screen. Everything on that thing was written to them by somebody else.
Do you remember when they didn't know what Wi-Fi was? There's stuff.
Is that true? I don't remember this.
Yeah, like, and when they were questioning Hillary about the emails, it was clear like they just didn't even know what to ask. And I thought, don't you have a staffer or somebody that can educate you on the basics?
They were told to ask them nuts. You know, they because these people are morons. So you look at the quality of people that we have in governance, and then you look at an electrician and a plumber. These people actually know what they're doing, right? You look at an engineer. Ryan, I have more and more respect for engineers. You know, my dad was a chemical engineer. My dad, man, he and I, we would stay awake until night. We would solve very, very complex problems. Nonlinear algebra. This was when I was in 8th and 9th, 10th grade. He would come home from work. You know, he was the manufacturing head of Colgate. I mean, they would have to make toothpaste. Well, it's a very complex process. Sometimes it would gel. It wouldn't come out right. And you're making vats and vats of this. So you have to mix engineering knowledge with production line work. And my dad was a super smart guy. I would write his papers for him. You know, so I learned a lot of fluid mechanics as a 13, 14-year-old, would derive equations. So my point is that scientists can bullshit because they're just taking data and they're fitting a line to a curve. But engineers have to take these physical laws and apply them. And if the physical laws are not real, if they don't work, things blow up. So
that's kind of Thomas Sowell's take on there's certain fields that you know the fruits by their products. There's a definite concrete, like if you're wrong, it doesn't work. Whereas with a lot of the arts and stuff, it's not a clear delineation from work doesn't work. They say, oh, we just didn't do enough this, or we did too much of that, or whatever. Whereas if you're building a bridge, like the classic example, like if it falls, you did it wrong. There's a clear thing in Bertrand Russell's philosophy of science too. Science gets to consistently stand on the shoulders of giants, like all that was already done, and then we get to add to that, and we get to add that. Humanity starts over each generation. There's no clear winner or whatever. But yeah, it's so easy. You have these subjects. I'm not saying the subjects are bullshit. I'm just saying the subjects are bullshittable. And so there's no one above to say this is bull and this isn't. There's no clear, like, it works, it doesn't work. So you end up with a lot of dumb theories that go on and on that are not falsifiable. You're just like, how many times you heard, oh, that wasn't true communism, or that wasn't that, it's democratic socialism.
So this is what's interesting. If you look at the history of social change, Ryan, it's been run by philosophers and theorists and economists, no hard science. And the reality was, even if you look at the concepts of John Locke or Marx or whoever you want to look at, Thomas Paine, all these guys, right? They were looking at the world. They were trying to say, okay, we want to create a quote unquote a better world. And they came up with theories of human behavior, etc. And what I'd like to share is, in the 1940s and 50s, the engineering system science comes into fruition. And what I uncovered through my own work, Ryan, was if you look at engineering systems theory, it literally links to, believe it or not, traditional systems of medicine. And I can talk long about this, but the bottom line is that same foundational theory of systems you can use to understand politics. And that is what I did in my Fulbright work. I don't know if I can share stuff here, but the bottom line is,
if you send it to me ahead of time, I can share it, but I'm not doing that live.
Yeah. But the bottom line is this, to your point, that in the world of subjectivity, the subjective people, unfortunately, have run the world for far too long. And this is a very, very powerful way to manipulate and confuse people. And from a political health standpoint, one of the things that I uncovered as a part of my PhD work was the intersection of engineering systems theory that you can apply to anything. And when you teach people this, they have a foundational framework. We should probably do a whole nother video on this at some point. You have a foundational framework to look at complex systems with a engineering framework. So you can understand your body as a system, not from an organ systems model, but from engineering science. you can apply it to anything. And that's why system science is so important. One of my former mentors, a guy by the name of Jay Forrester, believed you should teach systems science at the kindergarten level before reading, writing, and arithmetic. And it is the foundational science of the modern world. The elites actually learn it. George Soros, believe it or not, is a theoretician in reflexivity theory. So one of my missions is, I used to teach this at MIT. The goal is to make this accessible to pretty much everyone on the planet. Because when you learn engineering systems theory, you get a framework for looking at anything in existence.
But they don't see, there's all these false dichotomies where they want to delineate like science and religion, or
Right.
determinism versus free will and all that. And system theory sort of blurs the line between natural, supernatural with emergent properties and da, 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 da. It's not like one or the other. They constantly, Frankfurt School, want to pit things against each other. I want to give you an engineering joke because I think you'll enjoy this as an engineer. There's three engineers were in an argument about God. And the electrical engineer, of course, says, I think God's an electrical engineer. And he pointed to the nervous system, and then you can see the nerves and electricity from the brain. Da, da, da. That's well and good. But then the next engineer said, I think he's a mechanical engineer. And he talked about the skeletal system and the tendons and the way it moves and all that. And the third one said, nah, he's a civil engineer. Because only a civil engineer would put a waste disposal system in the middle of a recreational zone.
That's pretty funny, man. Who made up that joke?
It's I don't know, some William and Mary. It's old. We did science jokes. Why didn't the biologist and the physicist get along?
Yeah.
They didn't have enough chemistry.
That's pretty hilarious.
That's some dad joke right there.
Yeah. It's interesting, there's another joke like this. I don't know if you've been to Cambridge, Massachusetts, but there's a bridge that goes from the Cambridge side to the Boston side, right? Because the river is called the Charles River. And it's real, and it's right near MIT, right? So the bridge, if you're on Mass Ave on MIT, you keep going and you go over this bridge to Boston, and you come from Boston over to MIT. But it's right next door to MIT. And people always wondered why it's called the Harvard Bridge. It's not called the MIT Bridge. Harvard's way away on the other side. So the story goes, I don't know if this is true, but this is the folklore, that there was a essay contest given to MIT and Harvard on what the bridge should be named. Okay. So Harvard gave the essay to their head of literature. And he wrote this 50-page tome, on how great Harvard is and why this bridge must be named after Harvard, like 50 pages. MIT gave it to their head of civil engineering, and he wrote a one-page set of equations saying that MIT would never want their name on this bridge because it's going to fall apart in the next 50 years. But it's this fundamental understanding, right, that, but Harvard won the essay contest, supposedly, right? That this nature of subjectivity, where you can bullshit people, versus objective relations, which show, fundamental fact grounded in natural laws, you see? And that's where we are. So the era we live in is people can bullshit all day. And so you have one set of the bullshitting public who doesn't understand, wanting to be bullshitted too. And they do not want to take a situation and look at it very factually and materially to understand the grounded principles in it.
Mike Rivero has a great quote. He says that propaganda is not designed to fool thinking people, but rather to give fools an excuse not to think at all. They want they want the bullshit. That's what they want.
Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful thing, what you just said, because you and I look at this guy, Vivek the Snake, and we see a guy we want to slap the shit out of. He's a con man. And no, seriously, nothing out of his mouth. You can just see pure bullshit. And I was wondering the last 3 days, Ryan.
The more you bullshit, the larger your forehead gets.
Is that true?
No, but he has a big forehead. So
yeah. But what's interesting is that I was thinking about the guy's obviously fucking bullshitting you. Are you believing this shit? Are you actually following this? And
did you see where he told a Trump supporter, he's like, if Trump gets elected, they're going to assassinate him. That's why you need to vote for me to save Trump. That's what he was saying to a Trump supporter. Like,
I saw that whole
he
thing.
is, we call it a mirror mask. Whoever he's in front of is a social chameleon, but he's out, so it doesn't matter. Like that guy was like, just, I feel your pain, tilt the head, touch you on the shoulder. He's such a fucking con artist,
dude. But Ryan, you and I see that so clearly. My question is, a morons who actually believe his shit. So my question is not him
because they're desperate for a hero. Like they need.
No. I think it's more what you were saying before. I think they are actually bullshitters. They have actually not lived a real life. This is a conclusion. Forget him. You see, in order to be conned, you yourself have to. They say
the sucker kind of wants it. Yeah.
They say that a really good salesperson actually gets suckered by other people. Did you know this? Like most really good salespeople actually get suckered by other salespeople. Okay? So what I'm thinking about is all those people are behind him. If you actually look at their essence, they probably are not really doing anything substantive. They're probably bullshitters themselves. Because if you can't see that individual, like it's so fucking blatant, the guy's a bullshitter. So I've been thinking about this. Who gets bullshitted by these people and who's like fucking saying, what the fuck? I can't believe this shit. And I think the latter people are people who actually are competent, are serious thinkers and have done something tangible. And the people who are following these fools are actually bullshitters themselves. And they're actually people who are vacuous in and unto themselves. Otherwise, this can't happen. And I think it
is actually a learned skill to lie to yourself.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know how deep I want to get into that, but like that is it's just something I've noticed. I'm not talking about psychology. It's just from life experience, you can see people who can give endless rationalizations for something they're attached to tribally, whether it's
yeah, I can see that.
Religion or ethnicity or whatever.
Right.
It's like they can criticize everything outside their circle with logic and reason, but when it comes to their little cult, then it's like whoop, and they go, well, it means all this what they call mental gymnastics. They're unaware that they're doing that because it's a skill to lie to yourself, and it's something probably needed to protect themselves in a hostile environment. They got to like shift the scenario to where it'll make sense for them, but they carry that out into the world, and that's where they're constantly getting lied to, and they gobble it up. They gobble it up because they want to, but more importantly, they need to be lied to. They need a fantasy. It is weird that our society, you get whole communities that come together and just bullshit each other. They're just like, they need fantasy to escape life. And I'm like, what does that say about our society? Because that's full of shit. So do they. But you reinforce each other's, fantasy stuff because you can't cope with life without it. So they're saying, lie to me and I'll lie back to you. We'll reinforce each other's bullshit. And that just says something. And it's all corners of the world. People gather together and they bullshit each other. And that's how they float through life. And when something bad happens, there's some bullshit explanation. Like they can never face the problem head on. They don't have the skill set to do that. It's easier to retreat into fantasy.
Yeah, that's why I more and more respect engineers. You can't bullshit when you're an engineer. You're building something, it's got to work. Someone who's got to make something, it's got to work. You have to solve problems. So I am more and more appreciating somebody who made this cup, physically made it. This actually was made by one of our friends who's
hold it up to the middle. I don't think people can see it. But
yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of effort in making this. If you've ever made it, the glaze, you got to find the right temperature. There's a lot of problems you have to solve. And so I think as a culture, Ryan, I think the more we emphasize, I think mathematics is one of the most beautiful fields on the planet, man. It's an amazing field, right? Because in some ways it's a language of nature. By the way, mathematics and languages, do you know they use the same part of the brain? Language and math are actually computational. That's what emerged out of a lot of the linguistic theory. So when you go through the process of learning a language and you really learn hardcore math, you're using the same functional parts of your brain. But these are very, very fascinating areas because you have to do some very interesting things with your mind to learn how to do this. You're literally, doing some very important parts with your musculature in your brain. No different than when you go lift weights. It's very similar, actually.
Yeah, I think like math, language, music are things from rigorous repetition.
Right.
That you have to learn. Math can be very frustrating if you have to stop at every little thing. You should just know all your like multiplication stuff, like no problem. And like learning an instrument, there's a 6-year-old, if they're really disciplined, can jam out on the piano or a violin like just as well as an adult. And a little kid can learn different languages too. So it's not like the same kind of intellectual prowess as like philosophy or something, but it's just like rigorous discipline. And that's what you have with lifting weights. Anyone can lift a weight and then lift a little bigger weight and then lift a little bigger weight. It's not rocket science. But do you have the discipline to do that? Do you have the willpower to do that? And to me, that grit and will is more important than just like your general intelligence. Because like there's a lot of people who could have done a lot of things, but they lacked the discipline. It's not like they were stupid. It's they're too lazy. They're too whatever. They procrastinate. And it's a shame because there's people like, I know if you went to the gym, you'd look like this. If you actually practice this, you could do it better than me. But you don't have that willpower. They can't do it.
And I think this is a denial that's taking place in the educational system. I work my butt off, man. I used to go to bed at 2 a.m. and wake up at 7. And I used to come home from playing sports at 8. And I would do probably 100 problems. In order to do math, you have to do the problems and then it clicks.
You have to consistently do math or you'll forget how to do it.
Yeah, it's like a language. Mm-hmm. But the reality is you have to have the discipline to sit down, do the problem, figure out where you got it wrong, and do it over and over and over and over again. And I think that training, Ryan, is missing in everything, right? So people don't want to do the hard exercise. Oh, I'm going to take steroids. They do that, right? That's sort of a shortcut. I'm not going to really study the math problem. I'm going to find some way to talk to the teacher to say, I had this problem, that problem, or let a consultant write my essay. So
he's 6 years old. At night he likes to see how high he can cube numbers. So
that's cool.
Take a number and cube it, but without paper, like doing it in his head.
Yeah.
Cube 13,
cool.
Cube 14, Cube 15, like that. And sometimes he'll ask me something. It's like, is it blah blah blah? And I'm like, hold on. Yes.
Well, my
but it's that rigor, it's that muscle of the brain or whatever. Right. There's no point in cubing stuff. You could calculate it or whatever, but it gives you that skill that carries over into other things.
Right. Big time.
Which is a systematic understanding. Like, well, if you can do this, same with reading. Like if you read a lot, that will help you with imagination, which is going to help you with empathy, which is going to help you with the moral systems. It all comes back to these basics that are sort of thrown away. People are read too. They don't read enough.
Right.
They don't do math after they get out of school. They never do math again. A lot of people, or they never read. Some people, after they've gotten out of school, they never read a book again.
Yeah.
Never. Not unless they're made to.
Yeah.
They don't see how that just keeps your mind sharp. The stuff you do in daily life, usually, depending on your job, it's not like you're hunting for your food or whatever. There's nothing really challenging you. And so your mind starts to rot away. And buddy, like it really is true. Like if you're addicted to Netflix and porn and whatever you waste your time on, you literally start to get dumber and unable to figure things out. And that's why you're getting snowed, because the charlatan comes up there with his buzzwords and whatever, and you fall
maybe
for it.
Maybe that's the answer, Ryan. A lot of these people voting for a fool or thinking this bullshitter Vivek the Snake is saying something, their brains are literally atrophying, man.
I agree. Appeal the 19th. It's a joke.
Right.
It's a joke. I think they are an atrophy, and then they legalize weed and all that. I'm like, look, drugs, whatever. I don't care if you drink. I don't care if you smoke. But you got to recognize there's some people that shouldn't ever drink at all, and there's some people who should never smoke at all. Now, a lot of people understand that about alcohol. There's lots of people who drink all the time, doesn't really affect their life, and there's some people it completely ruins their life. But when it comes to marijuana, they're like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. I'm like, not to you.
That's
But
bullshit.
some people, it will totally destroy them, flip on schizophrenia, paranoid, all that. It rots your brain. Stay away from it.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened, you know, in India, there's this old slogan my grandfather once said, there's these two gurus, right? One guru actually meditates all day. You know, he actually does a meditation exercise, which is a lot of discipline. The other guy smokes weed all day. And he says, oh, I've had this spiritual experience, that spiritual experience. And my grandfather said the latter guy really it's bullshitting himself. And it turns out physiologically, your body has an endocannabinoid system. You're probably aware of this, right? And the endocannabinoid system is fueled, which means your body is a pharmaceutical engine. It creates its own cannabinoids. When you meditate, when you go into deep relaxation, when you do certain activities and you eat certain foods, your body makes all the cannabinoids it needs. And what's happened over time is people didn't do these disciplines. So now they're trying to simulate it by essentially getting it exogenously. No different than taking testosterone, right?
So much of it is your diet, your gut biome and stuff. When you say you are actually a series of different things. Like even the bacteria and stuff that like quote unquote live inside you are kind of you, because they're what's breaking things down, which determines what kind of hormones you end up with and stuff. Like all these little living things, actually your whole anything that's multicellular, you're actually a whole bunch of living systems. So like what constitutes you? That's kind of a question there, but so much of what you're going to be able to do is based on your diet. Like what you eat really affects your brain, and people don't, they just mountains of sugar. And I'm like, yeah, no wonder you got, you read the same sentence 6 times. You're not ADD. Your diet sucks.
Yep.
They don't even have ADD in Japan. Like that's not a thing.
Yep.
Like, that's not a real thing.
Well, what's happened, Ryan, is it's been many factors in the United States. It's been all these psychologists who've created some of these mental disorders, ADHD, ADD, whatever, right? It's the state wanting to own the kids and the parents not wanting to put any effort into discipline the kids. So the triangulation of that has led to a bunch of kids or parents saying, oh, my son Johnny is so brilliant. Yeah, he can't focus, but he's so smart. So, and the parents don't discipline the kids.
Can't
the kid
focus because of the digital babysitter.
Right. And the kid thinks he's a genius and he can't even he can't multiply 5 times 9. And this is a reality what's taking place. And I think broadly what's happened, Ryan, is the swarm, the global elites, and this is a broader theory I started tossing around, is that the global elites say, okay, because everyone says, oh my God, the economy is going to crash and the dollar is going to crash. And I really have to step back and think about it. And the reason is, I was talking to this friend of mine. He said, the Indian stock market, for example, is being pumped up. And wealthy Indians in India who own these stocks or the corporate heads, they are selling their stocks as they do buybacks. And when they sell, they're putting their money, guess where? Into US treasuries. So the global elites, if you consider them as a global swarm, consider the US their bankable asset, right? So they're going to keep the dollar up. So I don't have this view that everything is going to be a disaster because the global elites are together. So they want to keep the dollar up. Well, the way they keep their dollar up is to making sure they buy more dollars, right? And also to support Israel and all these foreign wars. So the elites are one. And as a part of this, I think what they're doing is they're saying, okay, the US base of the 200 million people, they don't really have to work. It's a very small part of the population, 2%, right, of the world's population. So, okay, we're going to have a bunch of nut jobs, who don't work, who live on, they can have ADHD, they can play video games. They're basically going to be dumb. but we will extract the labor wealth from India, Korea, China, other places, you say, from a global standpoint. So when I started looking at the flow of capital, you say, wait a minute. So if you look at these 8 billion people, and it's only a bunch of maybe you consider these people are not working hard in the United States and just becoming invertebrates, almost like cockroaches, right? No one's going to care about them because they're such a small part. And the global elites are like, yeah, we'll let people in America be semi-wealthy, right? Sort of be fat, dumb, and lazy. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter because we'll exploit labor from other parts of the world. And we're going to keep the American dollar quite, strong. So I've had to really do a little bit of thinking when people say, oh my God, the market is going to crash tomorrow. It's going to crash tomorrow. Notice since 84, people are right. Oh my God, there's going to be a Great Depression. It's going to crash. It's going to crash. It's going to crash. And it doesn't. The S&P keeps going up and up and up and up and up. The reality of it is. And I think the elites, we shouldn't underestimate them, have figured out how to move capital. They have the United States for perhaps their storage of assets, China for their manufacturing, India for doing something. England exists for MI6, Israel is their war, Mossad. And they've sort of distributed labor into this very complex organism. So I've really started to wonder with all these people, say, oh my God, the dollar is going to crash tomorrow. Meanwhile, all the elites are putting their money into the US. This is where they're banking it.
The dollar can't crash or everything crashes. Everything is so synergetically tied to the dollar that it would be against every nation's own interest if the dollar flopped.
Yeah.
Because they hold so many of them in reserve, and it's just that's the largest economy in the world by far, by tens of trillions. And if that goes, everything goes. It would be a global meltdown. It's not happening. The dollar can go down. Your standard of living can go way down, but the purchasing power of the dollar it can't go down without everything else going down. So
yeah,
it's like,
so a lot of these doom and gloom people will write me emails. Oh my God, tomorrow, mark my words,
It's because they saw a movie on YouTube about the Federal Reserve and how it's fiat and backed by nothing, and they just make money out of thin air and collect interest on it. And da 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 da. Like, I'm glad you saw that. You became an economic expert in a day. And so they're always saying the dollar's about to collapse. Ooh, what if they get off the petrodollar? It doesn't matter. People buy. The reason people use the dollar as a reserve currency for gasoline and oil is because it's the least volatility. You don't want to do multi-billion-dollar purchases and have it go up a fraction or down a fraction because either the buyer's going to get fucked or the seller's going to get fucked. You want a stable currency. The dollar is the hardest to manipulate because it's tied to the biggest economy. So they buy dollar reserves. It's not a rule. You don't have to. They choose to.
Yeah. And I think
and countries have gotten on and off the dollar all the time. India did it. Japan did it. Nothing happened.
Yeah. Do you remember when all these BLM protests were taking place in New York, a couple of years ago? A friend of mine.
When that was fashionable.
Yeah. A friend of mine had friend of hers. And the woman thought, oh my God, I'm seeing all these protests. I'm going to sell my apartment in Soho. This woman has spent her life savings getting this apartment. So she sells it low, moves, a beautiful condo. And now she's like, holy shit, why did I sell that? So the elites, what people need to understand, they're not going to let this crash for themselves on a fundamental level. But what they do
the giant wealth transfer with the lockdowns. They shut down commercial property, so it went, and they didn't know when it was going to reopen, but somebody did. And of course, Vanguard and BlackRock went around buying them up, and then reopened. And oh look, we own it all.
Exactly,
whole blocks.
And so they know how to buy low, sell high. Poor working people get lost in this nonsense, sell low. Right. And then they're buying high. So I'm convinced a lot of this fear mongering is to totally drive asset price, getting people to sell low. And so people need to be aware of this, what's going on. It's the larger conspiracy is how they manipulate people to get fear mongered. So you sell out low and you're always buying high. And that this condo example, and there's many, many examples like this. So
I have an idea. Why don't you buy a house to live in it instead of trying to use it as a commodity to flip and get rich quick?
exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
why don't you actually use it?
Yeah.
That's what it has value for, to live in
Right.
it, right? You shouldn't just be buying stuff hoping you can sell it for more than what you bought it for.
Yeah.
That's just gambling. That's all
We
that
have a
is.
commercial building I bought many years ago because when I built one of my companies to process email, we built our own data center. We use it. We use it for everything we do, right? It's a valuable, you use it as an asset and maybe you rent it to one person, right? Who's there. But I'm a big proponent of what you say, you get assets and you use them. But it's really, really unfortunate what I'm seeing with all this grifter shit that some people are just being stupid. They're selling making crazy investments, selling out shit at the wrong time, right? Because they think everything's going to crash tomorrow. And even if it does go down, the elite.
It's like the global warming crap. Like, people are getting 20 and 30-year loans on coastal property. They're not worried about flooding.
Right. I mean, you got to watch where all the Hollywood elites, when I was living out there, they all live right on PCH, Pacific Coast Highway. They have 20, 50, $100 million homes. I don't see any of them selling their homes. Obama buys a home in Martha's Vineyard, and they're buying them at the peak of the global warming, narrative. It's quite interesting.
That prevents other buyers, less competition.
Exactly.
Get it for lower. Yeah, it's a world of bullshit. It's run by satanic pedophiles. I'll leave it that, black pill.
All right.
I appreciate all your time, man. I think we could talk on and on. I know it's getting late in the East Coast.
Yeah,
it's the middle of the day here.
Yeah, we got to get up.
So I assume we got to go. But Dr. Shiva, and where can people find you and get active? Tell everyone.
Yeah, so look, the main things people can do is people should go to truthfreedomhealth.com. Truth Freedom Health. That location will give you the opportunity for those of you who are a little more intellectual and really want to integrate. It's really an engineering site in many ways. It's really a place where you can understand system science and become an activist, right? My view is you can't really do activism work without understanding what it takes to build a movement. And at the core of it, it's based on engineering system science. So that's Truth Freedom Health, The second part of it is, my running for president is really an effort in giving people an opportunity to see what one of us looks like, running. So you can go to Shiva4president.com. And when you go there, you can do one thing is you go get one of those bumper stickers that's up there and you put it on the back windshield. Why? Because you then become a force for reaching people, visibility. It's that first argument. One bumper sticker hits about 100,000 people a day, Ryan. So that's one thing.
It's that lemming effect too. When people think other people think something, they're more likely to express it.
So, and it also sends fear. So if you have one bumper sticker and you're 100,000 people say, they go, holy shit, that guy's supporting Dr. Shiva. It's also a way, if you hate the establishment, it's a big way of saying fuck you to them. Okay.
It's like a big middle finger in the back.
A lot of people buy those bumper stickers and they'll give them, oh, Bob, you got to put one of these on. Don't ever give a bumper sticker to a friend. Go to him and say, look, I'm going to give it to you for free, but I got to put it on your windshield because it's going to, and make a joke, it's going to save you, gas mileage. But you got to get them on people's cars. The second thing is on Shiva4president.com, we have a download, which is a very little newsletter. And it basically teaches people in one page who is a swarm, what is going on with the healthcare system in this country, and it invites people to come to our open house. Ryan, we do every Thursdays at 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. It's an open house. People get to meet people all over the world. And we actually solve a problem in the open house. We take the healthcare system, we solve it. We give people tangible things that they can do, independent of government ever being involved. That's our town halls. We actually solve the problem. We give people solutions. So those are the things people should do. Now, notice I haven't even asked for money at all. If people want to give money, and they do, I give people all sorts of books and courses that are equivalent to that, particularly learning system science. I'm a big proponent of young people learning it at the age of, young people, because when they can think from a systems perspective, they won't get bamboozled. So those are the places people should go to, Ryan, and get active. When you go collect signatures, you're alone in front of a retail store. If you want to be a real man or a real woman, forget about walking around with your gun. Why don't you go learn how to collect a signature, hand out a flyer by yourself? It'll really, really test your courage because you're out there alone. The police will show up. Oh, you can't collect signatures.
You can go in pairs.
Yeah, pairs is excellent.
Yeah.
Pairs is a good thing to do.
That's what Nader did.
Yeah.
We have some questions from chat. I should have said that.
Yeah,
first,
go ahead.
First one says, Dr. Shiva, got your sticker on my car and trying my best to promote you. Any advice? Also, Ryan, any opinions on Mossad Youssef, son of Hamas leader? He seems like Israeli Mossad agent. He's not a Mossad agent. He's just a dupe. You just sort of answered what they already asked.
Yeah.
RM Jim Zeus says, the only anti-Zog candidate in my lifetime. They censor the shit out of Dr. Shiva. That's 2 signs that I can take seriously. Consider voting. Also, cavity search to dehumanize. What scumbags. He also says, too base to debate. There's your slogan, Dr. Shiva. Too base to debate.
That's pretty good, man. That's pretty good.
I like it. Dr. Shiva, have you thought about the other half of your ticket yet? Who'd you take for vice president?
So I have we're not going to go after get some name celebrity. We have based our campaign on meritocracy, Ryan. So we have a young woman in Nebraska. Her name is Crystal Ellis. She's a mother. She's an entrepreneur. She works her butt off. So she's my running mate. To give you an idea, Crystal Ellis. Yeah, Crystal Ellis is out in Omaha, Nebraska. When I was running for office in 2020, she flew out in the middle of the winter and helped us collect signatures. So our movement is based on people who work. The leaders in our movement are people who go collect signatures, who do the work.
The exact opposite of equity hires or whatever.
Yeah, it's all bullshit. Yeah. So, when we let our movement grow, Ryan, people came, some people come, some people work. The leadership in our movement is we observe what people actually do. Do they work their ass off? Do they contribute something? Right? Because they're not going to be able to lead without, one of the things I want to do, Ryan, we should talk about this in a follow-up. I'm going to build my cabinet and think about our cabinet. We have a guy up in Massachusetts here who's an electrician, who's a radio guy. He knows everything about power plants. He's going to be our Department of Energy. When was the last time people actually had a guy who could solve equations, right? Build a power plant. So imagine we're going to have a guy called an attorney who's helping us with our constitutional side, who's actually fought the government. He's not a pussy attorney. He's going to be our attorney general. So to everyone listening, if you have a skill and go look at the cabinet positions, what we want to teach people is, look, that's the kind of guy who you want running that area because he actually knows the area. A Department of Agriculture guy, does he actually know about agriculture? Has he done farming?
I want to be the White House spokesperson.
All right, great.
Can you imagine the press? I get to handle the press.
We should seriously consider that. So what we want to do on the website is we want to literally feature all of our cabinet, and then I want to do interviews with them. Ryan, congratulations, you're the spokesperson. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Why do you think you're going to be good?
Great.
Yeah.
Koozball sends in 5, says, is Marjorie Taylor Greene owned by Israel as well? If so, explain. Yes. Are you kidding?
Of course.
Come on. Yes, she is. She's never opposed them on anything. Yeah. She wanted to get them more. KGB Josh says, welcome back, Doc. How do you plan on fixing the education curriculum in the States? For example, woke historians seem to praise JFK, Gandhi, Lincoln, MLK, almost as if the swarm picks their heroes. Kind of, he answered that already, saying, let's get back to pen to paper essays and things. But if you want to elaborate some more, you can.
Yeah, look, I'm a big proponent on the basic educational system. It has to be based on meritocracy. I really believe in these problems and solving, you got to go back 20 years and find all those old AP exam questions, all those hard math problems. And you actually have to give them to people. And if the kids fail, that means the teachers suck, right? And there's solutions for that also. And I can talk more about that. But bottom line is, I think when it comes to the real standardized things like mathematics, physics, these things should be bread and butter. Look, what I like about athletics in some way, if you have to hit a 95-hour fastball, there's no fucking politics to that. You hit it or you can't, right? If you have to go in the gym and bench press 225 pounds, you can't like bullshit your way to get 225 pounds off your chest. If you have a calculus, double integral and you have to solve that, either you can solve it or you can't. And I think the more life begins like that, it's very, very important, because then oh, that guy's a Michael Jordan, that guy's a fucking farm league player. What we've done is we've created an educational world no one even knows who to respect. Like, you should shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. Sit down, right?
Yeah, they make these things like art and PE electives,
Right,
where
they're
there's
not.
a pretty good delineation of like who can run faster than who.
Right.
And even though it's sort of subjective, whether that's a realistic drawing or not. Come on. So
I
they
think
did, but they go, they put all this stuff into subjects that are just
look. If you want to
filled
study
with bullshit.
all the subjective stuff, great. There's a after-school program to do that over here, and you can go join that. Not to say I don't like art and writing, and they're great areas.
Even when something's not objective, even when it's subjective, you still know there is a right answer.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But I'm saying you don't know that if you haven't ever had to do the right answer kind of stuff.
Like, technically, languages are subjective. Every single word ever was made up. But don't pretend to be dumb. Like, we have rules and grammar.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's not objective, but yes, it is.
Right, but
it's like there's an in between.
The constructs of grammar are actually very mathematical. They're logical, right? So you have to understand that, and it's either
right, but they're different from one language to another.
Right.
So it's like subjective,
right,
in that sense.
But even
it's true within a system. Like, once you set these parameters, then you have rules within these parameters. Yes, the parameters are arbitrary in the very beginning, but from everything contained inside these, there are objective true answers.
So Ryan, even if you look at a Picasso to Michelangelo, Picasso just didn't do those random drawings overnight. If you go look at it, I mean, he had to master the technical nature of drawing. Michelangelo, when he did the Sistine Chapel, right? I mean, it was an engineering exercise, in that small thing, how to draw all the stuff. So what people forget is, even in the real world of art, true artists, it's highly, highly technical. It's very, very technically based. And yet you have these wackos in Soho, trust fund kids.
They throw a piece of poop on the thing and be like,
he actually has no talent. And then he gets an agent who tries to talk about his story. Well, he was molested when he was 2 years old, and that poop on the wall represents this. So it's all bullshit. The person can't even technically execute anything. So
it's also a lot of money laundering, where they're like, right, what's this painting worth? They're like, well, I'm actually not buying the painting. I'm buying influence from, say, I don't know, Hunter Biden.
Right.
So yeah, it's worth 50 grand. It's like a dot on a white square.
Right.
Ben44 says, hi, Vivek, just joined the stream, but I thought you needed. Just kidding. Thanks for being a real G, Dr. Shiva. Triggered. Red Pill said, fire interview, straight fire. That's what the kids say today to mean something's good.
Okay.
I don't know how that started. Fire is good. No cap means like telling the truth.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like learn what the slang is today. Joke MPJMW sends it in dead link and says, how many people even know what the word Zionist means? We need to start by spreading the knowledge of these words and what they mean. An arrow with no direction is just a flying stick. All right, well, Zionist means Jewish supremacist.
Yeah,
you don't have to be Jewish to be a Jewish supremacist.
Right. It's believing the supremacy of that group. So look, I think part of this is what we're doing, and it's a unending job. We have to do this education. And so, it starts with, Zionism is racism, the service of imperialism, and then you have to break that down, right? And the media ain't going to do it. We've had to do a lot of teaching. Look, the Zionists collaborated with the Nazis.
Zionism is racial colonialism with a religious theme.
Exactly.
Lone Star tags it, said, Ryan is my professor at the University of Dawson Dagalon, and buy Corey Hughes' book. Corey Hughes just wrote a book on JFK assassination, so he's plugging that. It is pretty good. And Doug Shit Poster 69 for $1 Says Dr. Shiva in you. Dog shit again. These stupid jokes. Lowell Vivek is gonna be Trump's VP or cabinet member. I don't think so. Trump gave him quite the grilling recently, so I don't think like that's the thing. Bullshit knows bullshit. Trump's not going to get
Bullshit knows
about
bullshit, but he may jack off Jared Kushner and get something, because they're very good.
Yeah, if he really wants to get in, he's got to get in with the family, capital F.
Yeah.
Let's see I think I got them all. Oh, the P1 Dizzy for 25. Dr. Shiva, I don't know if you have children or grandchildren, but what would be your advice to make a difference in our neighborhoods, cities, and states, considering the current opposition? So this is a grandmother saying, how do we save the kids? What can we do?
Yeah, it's a look, I think I never, I was so dedicated to everything I was doing. I brought up so many kids in other ways, so many students. And I felt if I ever had my own kids, Ryan, that I would never do anything because I'd be so scared of what the hell's going on in this society that I'd be a control.
I always called my students my kids. I'd
Yeah,
refer to them as like my kids. They're not. I have actual kids, but like they were my kids.
Yeah. So I think I've had thousands of kids on some deep level. But what I believe is many of these young people are looking for structure. That's what I've seen. They're looking for discipline. And they really, really want it.
They are. That's why they all loved Andrew Tate, because it's the guys saying, get in the gym, do this, do that. Like they really covet, or not covet, they really desire some sort of structure.
Yeah, but he's taking them into some other way. He's exploiting that in a different way.
Well, even if you just took the minimal advice, like get off your ass, lift some weights, find something and master it, like, okay, because they really desire structure and they just don't see it. And there's almost the antithesis of that.
But
not just not having structure, it's the opposite.
Yeah, this other jackass Jordan Peterson talking about that, right? So
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is they know that's missing, but where does it lead? So I think it's a structural piece, and there's an and there, and teaching people that they need to pursue something in the world where they're learning an actual set of skills, you say, that can benefit them long term. So if it's math, physics, engineering, learning music, right? They have to pursue the structure to give them the vessel to pursue actual tasks. And I think these are the conversations the parents, I don't know if they're doing them with their kids. I don't know what the hell is going on, right? But I do know that a large majority of people are not being given that structure, how to do a schedule, how to lay out, how to set a goal, right? And pursue that. And I think
list and check it off.
Yeah. I mean, the basic checklist. 90% of what I do is when we get all these volunteers and people, really nice people. Do you have a calendar schedule? Do you know how to create a checklist? No one ever. Why should I do that? Right. So I think what's happened is a lot of this stuff used to be taught, Ryan, and it hasn't been taught. So that's what I think parents can do right away.
The educational system has become completely divorced from pragmatism.
Well,
and so you'll see students, even when something's hard, like academically hard to do, the number one question little kids will ask is, what is this for?
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't see it like, well, here's why you need statistics. Here's why you need math for this. Like you can't do statistics unless you learn this other math, and you're going to need this to understand that. They don't know what the application is in the real world. It's just these find X, Y, like what am I doing this for? And there's very hard for them to be motivated when none of the stuff for a long time they're learning in school seems to apply in real life. In fact, they even refer to things as school or real life, which means school isn't real life.
Yeah, that's
how they see it.
I mean, I learned most of my stuff just starting work as a 13, 14-year-old kid, work. So I would, remember the old lemonade stand kids were taught to do as fun? In some ways,
not safe to do that anymore.
Right. Exercises like that, you learn a lot if that was instantiated, right? You have to learn how to add, you have to learn customer service, you have to learn marketing. It's a systems problem that you have to solve when you have to run a lemonade stand, right? I think when kids teach other kids, they learn. The old model was you teach and you learn. In fact, many of the courses when I taught, I learned more than when I used to take the courses. And so I think the concept of learning, but the next part is that same course a kid should actually teach to somebody else. So this concept of what I call dual pedagogy needs to also be in the model. I mean, a lot of people are doing homeschooling. The problem is some of the homeschooling doesn't have structure. And I don't know if the kids are actually learning stuff, you know, on the long level, but it's better than what the public school system is. But I think the structure and the concept of teach a kid, even an 8-year-old, learning how to teach a 6-year-old, right? They learn a lot, communication skills. And they've seen this in, you know, frankly, how animals learn, right? One learns, they teach. And that's how collectives learn together.
I see that happen with my own children. My 3-year-old's very good at Korean because he sort of absorbed it when we moved here. So he's not the same level as the 6-year-old in Korean, but the 6-year-old can speak English and Japanese too.
I see.
So, but his Korean's kind of new. Korean and Japanese have similar grammar structure, so it actually makes it harder.
I see.
It's better to just not be the same.
Right.
But anyway, they'll be communicating with each other, and the 3-year-old enjoys, I have something I can teach my older brother.
And
then of course he can teach him just about everything else. And then I have a 14-year-old too, that they just worship him, you know, and like they'll listen to him more than they listen to me.
I see.
And so, but I'm like, okay, I taught you how to do that. Teach your little brother. And that is a way you're going to remember and learn too.
I see. Very cool. Yeah. So, you know, when we do our program, we call it Learn, Teach, and Serve. You learn, that's one part. But when you teach, you're giving back something, you're also learning, and then you're serving. So I think that should be the educational model. All right, Ryan, this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
See you next time.
Yeah, be well.
We're gonna end this with a lot of Greed Martin.
Okay.
Greed Martin, proud producer and proprietor, patriotic projectile party poppers. Got some uppity brown people making trouble for your empire? Replace them with a charred freighter and a cloud of white smoke. So remember, if your next geostrategic boondoggle's going awry, don't call us, we'll call you.